Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into land where children elbowed their way into the coal-blackened hearts of Victorian society. Yes, we're talking about the fascinatingly odd era when Victorian children worked as chimney spies. Picture this: tiny folks with soot-streaked faces, not exactly interpretive dancers, but highly skilled operatives in the art of sneaking around the flues of London. So, before you snuggle in for your cosy journey, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy the sheer absurdity of the human history I share with you, and drop a comment letting me know from where you're tuning in. Are you in your pyjamas, contemplating the great mysteries of life, or trying to remember the last time you did laundry? Now dim those lights, turn on a fan for a soft, soothing breeze, and snuggle in as we embark on this peculiar escapade together. Let's ponder for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in an age where kids climbed inside chimneys instead of climbing trees? Did they ever consider surviving with nothing but a scrap of bread? What if you had to crawl through narrow, sooty shafts all day long? Would you try to convince your parents that you were destined for great things, or merely that you were really good at hide and seek? And now, congratulations, you've just woken up in Victorian London. It's 1850, and your small body is now the only thing standing between a gentleman and a clean chimney. Good luck. The moment you stepped into the sun-kissed streets of Victorian London, you quickly realised the sinister underbelly of childhood. Forget games and joy. You are now embroiled in a world where children were prime suspects and spies in their neighbourhoods. Why join the chess club when you can infiltrate coal-blackened chimneys? You soon found that being a chimney spy was less about saving the world and more about ensuring you didn't become a casualty of the soot war erupting in households desperately trying to maintain a semblance of cleanliness. Your initiation into this shadowy world involved meeting with seasoned chimney spies, children who had transcended the age of innocence and were now seasoned veterans in the fine art of navigating narrow flues. Picture this: you're in an alleyway, swapping tips on how to avoid sticky situations, rescue dogs, angry homeowners, and most importantly, other rival chimney spies, while covered head to toe in soot. Truly, it was like a summer camp, if summer camps involved possible suffocation and the occasional rat as your companion. Eager to impress your peers and prove yourself, you dove headfirst into your training like a young superhero embracing their calling. You were outfitted with ragged, oversized clothes, because nothing screams spy excitement like fabric that drags behind you in the dust. And of course, you couldn't forget your stoic expression. Nobody ever took a spy seriously while giggling over lost dolls. Instead, you practiced your now permanent scowl in the nearest puddle, just to ensure you could maintain your cover. Ah, the joys of chimney life. With your heart racing, you'd crawl into the depths of grimy chimneys, a makeshift canvas for the soot paintbrush of fate, piecing together secrets overheard from the muffled conversations happening above. Through cracks and crevices, you gathered information about what the adults were truly discussing, ranging from real estate woes to scandalous affairs involving the lady of the house and the gamekeeper. Imagine the thrill. No need for thrillers when you had real gossip spilling out like the occasional ash cloud in your previously unblemished neighbourhood. Cleaning those veins of coal didn't come without its share of hardships, of course. Each sweep was a tick on the tally of dangers one might face, passing you into a hardened yet longing for freedom soul. You could hear the distant clink of coins being dropped into waiting hats, enticing you further into the world of pivoting allegiances on damp rooftops. The gold most spy heroes captured didn't just end up as pocket change. It could mean a week's worth of loaves, or the humiliation of seeking out meals whose taste was less fabled feast, and more kitchen scraps. Yet camaraderie flourished even within the soot-stained silence. As fellow chimney spies forged alliances, you celebrated small victories, like emerging from a particularly rancid flue without having attracted a neighbours' dubious attention. You soon shared laughs over ash-covered sandwiches and dished out dirt on each other's work, culminating in a unique bond formed in a universe where being clean meant only smear-free smirks when neighbours passed by. But as each day unfurled, you began to feel the toll of this undercover existence. The weight of secrets was heavier than any sack of coal, and each trek back into the blackened abyss became a little more daunting. When will it end? Was a question you found worth muttering beneath your soot-smudged breath. You'd catch the wistful glimpse of children playing hopscotch. Yet, your daydreams about ball games were dulled by the inevitable call of duty. Who knew that your childhood would consist of manoeuvring obstacles that would give modern spies a run for their money? You survived the perils of rooftop escapes and the unyielding necessity of creations like the food in the flue invention, a delightful take on roasted chestnuts with just a hint of charcoal, of course. Somehow, amidst the discomfort, you learned that there was an undeniable wisdom buried beneath those ashes, the chance to mould your future while traversing the breadth of your limited childhood. In the end, being a chimney spy wasn't merely about dirty hands and furtive glances, it was a rite of passage. Stepping into Victorian London as we hesitate to shake the memories off, you crafted tales as you brushed off that coal-dusted susceptibility. You were not merely another child, you were a champion of cunning and perseverance, navigating a world where life and survival unexpectedly intertwined. Getting started. The training of child operatives. With the eyes gleaming like polished coals, you were taken under the wing of seasoned chimney spies. Your schooling involved some intense upsides, crawling on all fours through soot-strewn flues, like a dirtier version of hide and seek, with a healthy dose of don't get stuck thrown in for good measure. The local chimney master, a grizzled man with a beard that looked like it had been swept up from one of his own chimneys, would bellow orders like a drill sergeant. No pressure, it's only your life at stake. As he explained, knowing how to shimmy your way through narrow bricks and back out before the owner came home was an absolute necessity, preferably without the added drama of being trapped and having to feign being a lost cat. You partnered up with a few other children, who looked equally terrified yet determined. Each day started with a quick pep talk, mostly threats of having to clean the charred remains of a week-old stew if you failed. Remember, the chimney master reminded you, the goal is to cause as little fuss as possible. As if lurking in a sooty belly of a house wasn't a fuss in itself. The smell alone was enough to induce preemptive gagging. You were instructed to climb into blackened holes before breakfast, which, considering the appetising combination of burnt wood and whatever mystery dripped from the ceilings, was akin to culinary torture. Ah, but how delightful it was to travel the windy paths of the home. The moment you left the light of day behind and squeezed into the narrow flue, you felt like a true explorer, full of dreams and dust. The walls, all clinging to soot, whispered secrets you had yet to learn. And what did you discover? Crevices full of forgotten toys, dirty secrets that hadn't made it to the annual estate sale, and yes, the occasional jerk of a cat that was decidedly less amiable to your ambitious infiltration plans. Who knew household pets could be so judgmental of a kid's career choices? The truth is, training as a chimney spy was not without its perils. You learned quickly that a springy jump could land you head first into an abyss of foul odours and cackling voices if you didn't keep your wits about you. And let's not forget the rival teams of chimney operatives, those smug four-footers who decided proving themselves by pulling pranks on each other would also work as excellent team-building exercises. If you weren't careful, you could become part of a dirty prank war that left you looking like a feathered piñata after a party gone wrong. As time passed, however, you grasped sector strategies. The best way to navigate an entire house covered in decaying remnants of past meals the eco-approved way to dodge guard dogs and toddler tantrums, and yes, how to use a broom like a magician's wand, ensuring you maintained your cover while sweeping up your own trail of soot. You discovered that smoke was your friend, a disguise that transformed you from mere child to an elusive shadow. Oh, and the camaraderie. Nothing brought you closer to your fellow spies than shared trauma and a hasty plan to escape a tight chimney squeeze. As you listened to tales of other spies, some who made it out covered in coal dust and admiration, others who had endearingly gotten stuck upside down in some family's dining room chimney, sporting more soot than dignity, you realised you were part of an elite society of small-scale operatives who could hustle and make bravado work. So, as you faced each training day with a mix of dread and determination, were you really staving off a future as the world's worst chimney cleaner, or were you forging a path to secret agent glory? Only time would tell if one day you'd trade dirt for a tuxedo, but for now you accepted your fate as a little soot-streaked private eye, armed with your own self-made pride and a perpetual craving for a slice of bread that didn't have a suspicious aftertaste. Would you be the next one chosen to ascend to the upper echelons of Chimney Spydom, or would you spend your days dodging smoke and rival teams? The world of chimney espionage awaited, and your future was just as blackened as the soot-stained walls surrounding you. Adrenaline tingling in your fingertips, you prepared for greatness, one filthy flue at a time. The recruit's wardrobe, dressing for success. And soot. Who needs trendy outfits when you can swim in a cloud of soot? Your wardrobe now consisted of ill-fitting, tattered clothes that were more like living relics of coal. It's like a fashionista's nightmare, guaranteed to give you both a bad stain and an even worse reputation. Picture yourself traipsing down the street in clothes so vague and threadbare that they could almost pass for an homage to abstract art. Bravo, young artist. But there's more to the narrative than just wearing the same once-white tunic that has now transformed into a fashionable chiaroscuro masterpiece. The fabric of your existence was woven from the threads of misfortune, where fashion trends took a backseat to practicality. Every time you emerged from a chimney, your outfit would change shades right before your eyes, embarking on a rapid journey from pale grey to burnt umber. Heaven forbid someone accidentally mistake you for a walking ashtray. Aside from the lovely aesthetic of primordial stew, these garments served dual purposes, keeping you warm in the draftiest of flues and making you nearly indistinguishable from the filth that surrounded you. Consider it a built-in camouflage system designed for sneaking through dust-laden corridors without raising the alarm. Now, let's discuss laundering, or rather, the lack thereof. The thought of a soothing wash in fragrant waters. Laughter echoed through the chimneys at such a notion. Instead, your clothes experienced a more profound and enriching layer of grime for every venture. A rinse in the frosty Thames was ideal for teasing the filth. However, if you dared to do so, you'd be sent back straight into the soot-filled fire from which you had escaped. So, you decided to add scent to the strategy, and made sure to bundle yourself in an aromatic concoction of old coal, stale bread, and maybe a pinch of desperation. And then, if you were particularly lucky, you might find yourself dripping in the latest vintage trends of Victorian London. Marred by the shadows of chimney dust wars, every outfit birthed an abject narrative of resilience. It was the social fabric of the underclass, woven into each charred stitch, consciously or subconsciously crafted by little hands that still found beauty buried beneath layers of soot and economic despair. But let's be honest, the benefits of this ensemble were dubious at best. Sure, in a pinch, you could probably convince onlookers that you were playing a dramatic role as the infamous sooty stalker. A dark and brooding figure defending the usability of Victorian garb against the non-suspicious likes of top hats and stylish capes. However, at what cost does such performance art come? Let's not get too reverent about this star-studded career. And then there was the matter of footwear. If you were blessed enough to possess something resembling shoes, they were likely made of worn leather, barely able to keep out the cold, wet ground, and likely a breeding ground for an array of intriguing fungal cultures. You could step in puddles, but the puddles would probably thank you for bringing their context into the limelight. Alternatively, you might have been stuck with a stylish pair of wooden clogs. Sure, everyone admired the craftsmanship, but no one respected the poor soul stumbling about making more noise than a Victorian dinner party gone wrong. What's better than a good old chimney sweep? Why the clumsy fool walking beside him? As you hesitated before stepping out into your stark daily reality, you might consider the beauty in your attire, not just as a reflection of survival, but also as a rambunctious rebellion against a society that preferred a touch more finery on their children. The smudges weren't just colours, they were badges of honour. Every speck of chimney dust was a testament to a life lived on the edge, solitary, perilous, but also delightfully absurd in its unique way. So, the next time you encounter a stylish vignette, perhaps consider not just the aesthetics of the outfit, but also the invisible stories stitched into seams and the ephemeral nature of youthful rebellion. In a society that expects perfection, you embodied chaos, and you did it all with a flair only a child can muster in the heart of the most unlikely of fashions, a trainee chimney spy. Now it's time to explore what it was like to scrape knees and chase aspirations in the shadows of Victorian smoking flues, where youthfulness blossomed amid soot stains and whispered secrets. Just remember, darlings, all that glitters isn't gold, but tattered attire. That's where the adventure begins. If you'd like me to continue with the next segment or make any adjustments, let me know. After hours of craning around flues, what's a hard-working chimney spy to do? Snack time, of course. Your meals consisted of whatever mystical remnants you could scrounge, perhaps a stale biscuit or the mysterious remnants of last week's crumbs. Nothing beats soot-dusted morsels to fuel your top-notch espionage abilities. Every crevice you squeezed through was a potential treasure trove of forgotten scraps, and each day you wondered if today would be that fateful moment when you uncovered last night's leftover stew, a culinary jackpot on par with winning the Victorian lottery. Imagine the aromas wafting through the soot-clad air as you inched your way through those narrow tubes. If you were lucky, someone might have tossed a half-eaten apple core into a chimney, or even better, an entirely intact crust from a pie that had somehow evaded the hungry homes of its owners. However, truth be told, expression of culinary delight from a fellow chimney spy was often squelched by the horrifying reality that most meals tasted like they had just come from the dumpster of a fly-infested bakery. Each bite was accompanied by the nagging question, whose leftovers were you ingesting while playing the part of a rogue nutmeg thief? Think about it. You're practically a medieval treasure hunter, your fellow chimney spy might exclaim, while gnawing on a dubious lump of bread that had likely been blessed by a priest a few months ago. What could possibly be more satisfying than wrestling with food on a quest to take down the aristocracy? Conspiring against the gentry over nightlight meals formed alliances that handled minor conspiracies, while fueling hidden desires to see those smoke-filled stories come to life. Before you may ask, what do I do when there are no salvaged morsels in sight? The answer lay in the imaginative realm of Victorian snacks. Local taverns, under the guise of polite society, occasionally sent out treats for the scullery maids to collect. Allowed to skim off the surface, you knew your real mission was to increase your scouting skills to score one of those much-desired rock-hard ginger biscuits or dare you dream. A deep-fried potato, crusty yet oddly comforting like a coal-stained hug. But consuming these delicacies while perched on the edge of a soot-specked chimney realistically did not shield you from the trappings of reality. You soon learned that chewing on vintage bready remnants came with its appetizing downsides. Fingers felt sticky after lugging around the soot-splattered remains of yesterday's dinner. Your once pristine tunic now sported vintage stains that made your parents proud of their frugal parenting choices, while denying their misguided decisions to allow you to scamper about in the coal-touched underbelly of society. Yet amidst the chaos, delight emerged. Children, keen on clever enterprise, began inventing the chubby chimney sweep's treats, cleverly entrusting long-time coal merchants with a little extra incentive to sprout fresh loaves billowing with the scents of rosemary and garlic amidst the blackened awfulness. Suddenly, your lunches turned into clandestine little adventures of bribes and banter, paired with the elusive prize of half a loaf of bread. Conversations would spin about the latest soot-stained scare, overshadowing the potential threat of parental repercussions should they discover your culinary exploration. As you sat perched on parapets at a safe distance from bustling London streets, the dynamics of food began to reveal your hidden talents. Wanting to design menus that catered not only to your taste buds, but also managed to keep you sprightly and valuable among your fellow spies, you noticed that using any and all local ingredients became a prized secret. You began experimenting with your own recipes, a tad of spices here, a few heaped crunches of leaves there, turning pestilence into fine dining on the soot-splattered podium of society. Eventually your work turned mundane moments into lessons for fellow spies, practicing grand dinner parties for those who dove into slightly less dirty waters while fairing jokes resulted in a banquet of camaraderie. Ah yes, who said working-class kitchen gatherings had to be mundane? After all, scooping ale-flavoured porridge into charming childlike bowls mixed with dark humour turned every meal into an excuse for union meetings. Each bite shared under the soot-covered canopy transformed sneaky exploits into cherished moments, ensuring staying power and bonding. So, in those brave endeavours of culinary transcendence amidst soot and debris, remember that even the world's tiniest spies can discover layers of delight. Whether you're stretching your arms through collapsed bricks, concocting secret menus, or trading jokes for stale biscuits, every inch of that grime enlivens your soul, granting you the rare opportunity to thrive in the strangest of places. The world may have seemed dark and uninviting, but amid the shadows there always lay something worth nibbling on, a laughter-filled morsel and a friendship found within the soot. Sooty sauces, the culinary delights of a chimney spy. Ever wondered what it feels like to eat dust? You found out quickly. Meals weren't just bland, they were an adventure. Think of a delicious stew of who knows what cooked over a single flame, with a generous sprinkle of chimney dust for that extra texture everyone raves about on Instagram. Breakfast was particularly glorious, assuming you could manage to wake up before the other hungry chimney spies in your creaky tenement. Usually this meant scrounging for scraps before the sun even thought about shining, like some sort of Victorian raccoon on a mission for crumbs. You never really knew what you were getting with a meal back then. Sometimes it consisted of a disappointing piece of dry bread, warmed lovingly by a mother's pitiful approach to pantry management. Other times, it might involve the dregs of a leftover pottage. Think of it as a witch's brew of week-old vegetables decided to stick around the house a little too long. Occasionally, if you were terribly fortunate, you might stumble upon something that resembled meat. Meat, however, was almost as mythical as the Loch Ness Monster in a chimney spy's diet. Hardly ever seen, often debated, and generally rumoured to be lurking somewhere in the shadows. It wasn't long before you learned the fine art of making something out of, well, less than nothing. Maybe it was the last remnants of last week's potato peelings, crumbled like a long-forgotten secret, or that suspicious-looking bit of grey, stringy substance you hoped was cheese, and not something that the family cat left behind. Either way, you became a master of improvisation. A sprinkle of salt, laying down the law in a kitchen that only pretended to exist, could transform a bowl of deer droppings into a delicacy worthy of showcasing in a gallery of fine foods. And then there were the drinks, or perhaps the tragic absence of them. Water wasn't the refreshing stream you dreamt of finding. Rather, it was a grave danger lurking beneath the surface, harbouring more germs than your last chimney job. Your first sip would linger like a criminal. A splash of diluted ale seemed like the safer route. After all, the adults said it was good for you. To think you were starting your days not with milk, but with a hangover the size of a small elephant lurking just behind your frontal lobe. Lunchtime rolled around faster than you anticipated, and once again you faced the inevitable choice. Dodge the appetizing odour of yesterday's mushroom soup, or throw caution to the wind with a questionable heart. Well, hey, you only live once, right? You made your way into the kitchen, armed with an empty bowl and dreams of culinary innovation. If kitchen disasters lingered in your mind, so too did visions of becoming the next culinary icon. Of course, social media didn't exist back then, but in an age full of adventure, you could hype it up as much as you fancied in the local play, Yard. But nothing prepared you for the beauty of dinner. The family gathered around a single board placed atop the rickety table that creaked like it was auditioning for a ghost story. This would be your nightly symposium, a culinary spectacle, in which you'd take turns ladling pottage into bowls, all while pretending not to notice the extra seasoning that might shift around beneath the surface. And if you were very fortunate, you transcended the typical fare altogether with the deliriously rare treat of a meat pie. Now, when I say meat pie, understand this. It was a culinary enigma wrapped in a dusty pastry. Your gaze was more of a security check than a loving tribute, a mystery. Meat contained within could easily change based on the whims of whatever your neighbour had decided to toss over their fence that afternoon. But hey, as a chimney spy, you learn to appreciate the beauty hidden within even the murkiest of meals. By the end of each day, between crawls and food adventures, you found yourself emerging from the soot and grime. A true warrior of the culinary frontier, preparing to take on the world, if only for another round of dubious supper. You wore your coal-dusted scars like badges of honour, and while you may have nearly become embedded in the very chimneys you cleaned, you learned young that the thrill of culinary adventure is what kept you connected, bonded through exploration, and yes, maybe just a little covered in the soot of your own making. With your newfound identity, you entered an exclusive club powered by a dash of intrigue and a sprinkle of panic. You'd forge alliances with other chimney spies, not only for friendship, but also for the indispensable knowledge of how to hide the evidence of your crisply pressed black-tinged tunic. In the world of chimney cleaning, the bonds formed between young operatives were akin to secret pacts, like a covert version of a child's playdate, where playtime included climbing nooks and dusty crannies instead of doll houses. Each day brought you deeper into the ranks of the elite soot scrubbers, where only the cleverest survived. In your circle, camaraderie was just as important as skill. You'd swap tips on the best routes through narrow flues for the perfect eavesdropping opportunities, your immature minds spinning tales as airy as the smoke billowing from the chimneys. Did you hear Mr. Tumbleton was at it again with that cranky cat of his? Perfect distraction for a little sneaky peek. One of the street's more inventive child spies would exclaim, their eyes wide with glee at the thought of inching through the walls to uncover another scandal. Sharing gossip over lunchtime scraps became a ritual of brotherhood and sisterhood among mini-espionage experts. Who knew you could bond so closely over the threat of human soot? As you navigated through the social circles of your grimy cohorts, a strange kinship developed. Besides sharing secrets about the neighbourhood adults, there was a tacit understanding that your life was not conventional. Now, if I manage to crawl through Mrs. Puffle's chimney without being detected, I'll have enough to grab a few crumbs from our pantry, you remarked to your ally Henry. The very notion of plotting out who gets the bread was a source of both competition and camaraderie. You exchanged high fives coated in ash, as if sealing your youthful ideologies with a signature blend of soot. Of course, every club has its hierarchy, and yours was no different. The more skilled chimney spies earned their stripes, or at least gained the useful title of Chief Soot Sleuth, while the younger recruits scurried about, eager to prove their worth. You already envisioned the day you could rise to the lofty heights of Chief Soot Sleuth, basking in the admiration of fellow younglings while dispensing sage advice about squeezing through tight spaces. "Just act like a worm! They'll never see you," you would say, as sage advice for the newer recruits too timid to brave the dark depths of the chimneys. Speaking of bravery, within the Cool Kid Club, each trek into a smoky cavern turned into an adventure of grand proportions. Upon completing a successful mission, sensing you had outsmarted the grown-up world while navigating murky, oil-soaked tunnels, you'd return to the street with tales that made your fellow chimney mates cheer. "You met the Queen," they would exclaim, hearts racing at the thought of your audacity. Well, technically, you had just overheard a royal visiting Mrs. Wimple's home, but details like that didn't matter in the eyes of your comrades. To them, you had made contact with legends. But in this underground fraternity, danger lurked. As fun as it was to be wrapped in the excitement of childlike espionage, competing against your peers could quickly escalate to intense rivalry. One day, Charlie from the neighbouring street decided he wanted to become the most esteemed spy too. "I can clean chimneys better than any of you," he declared, the battle lines drawn with ash. Now it wasn't just about scraping soot and earning your keep. It became a game of one-upmanship brought to life, a high-stakes competition that might decide whether or not you earned the revered title of Soot Wrangler. Amid the fierce but harmless competition, you also faced social pitfalls. The streets were filled with fellow chimney pixies who might turn against you in a blink. Their coal-blackened faces shone with a rival stone, and one misstep could lead to a well-placed kick, an affront unthinkable in your close-knit world. "Watch out for Daisy's crew, they don't play nice," your friend warned, shaking with barely contained laughter. Suddenly the stakes raised. There was no second chance if caught sneaking past the whips of rival spies. In this chaotic social circuit of miniature espionage, kneeling to tie your tattered shoelaces felt more like kneeling before a council of elite spies, a competition swirled with soot and aspirations. Among other children, you thrived and learned the intricate art of loyalty, deception and friendship, all while climbing your way toward the goal of becoming a chimney cleaning icon, a title held in high acclaim among your coal-stained peers. Life as a chimney spy wasn't just a job. It was a daring lifestyle where adventure thrived under the cover of smoke and camaraderie stitched itself through dirt-filled dreams. The art of eavesdropping, tips from the top. As a chimney spy, eavesdropping was your bread and butter, or perhaps more accurately, your soot and butter. In your new career, the keen ability to overhear scandalous affairs quickly replaced your academic pursuits, somewhat like being the world's best-kept secret, but dustier. You had one job, and it certainly wasn't to solve complex equations or discuss the finer points of Shakespeare. It was to listen, to hide, and to discern juicy tidbits that could keep your masters revelling in gossip and plotting. Each day, you crawled through narrow flues that offered a voyeuristic view into the lives of the well-to-do, their conversations swirling with intrigue and scandal. Imagine this, squeezed into a chimney, the warm air brushing your face, mingling with the dust like the remnants of last Christmas's festivities. Noses twitching with coal. You could hear it all. The muffled whispers of the lady of the house as she plotted where to hide her precious silverware, or the gruff tones of a gentleman discussing more than just the weather with a dubious-looking visitor. With your heart racing, you quickly committed these little secrets to memory. It's like performing live theatre, except you were the unnoticed cast member lurking in the shadows, and your performance would either earn you a crust of bread or a swift kick in the backside. Of course, it wasn't without its challenges. The downside of being a hearing specialist, the incredible urge to cough or sneeze, particularly during particularly dramatic revelations. Nothing spells disaster like a little sneeze echoing through the flue, announcing your presence in a manner decidedly less than discreet. Just picture it. The moment you accidentally interrupted a gentleman discussing a scandalous affair with the baker's wife, only to let out a banshee-like cough as you inhaled a cloud of soot, sending your career as a spy spiralling down the flue with you. So, how did you scale the Everest of eavesdropping odds? Here are a few handy tips. First and foremost, silence. Develop a spine of steel as you learn to hold your breath and remain as still as an old statue until you were certain the coast was clear. Remember, every moment spent frozen in an uncomfortable position was worth the golden information that might tumble from the lips of unsuspecting adults. You might have been small, but your ability to remain undetected was your greatest weapon. Then came smart tactics, like the soot-covered salute. Position yourself cleverly. Whenever your penetrating ears strain to catch the latest scoop regarding town gossip, or a neighbour's financial struggles, make sure to hoist yourself high enough to catch the right angles. Thankfully, chimney design always favoured those alert enough to climb the nearest flue or elbow their way through. Your small size meant few could squeeze into the tight spaces in the way only you could. There were dangers, though, lurking among the damp walls of the chimneys. Not just the risk of detection, but the occasional bird. Yes, pigeons sometimes swoop down from the entry, mistaking your tiny foothold for a comfortable landing. When you found yourself stealthily listening to a 6-part melodrama about entangled love affairs, delicate schemes and flower arrangements for weddings, you quickly lost focus as a feathered fiend barreled in uninvited to steal your thunder. One swat too many, and there went your cover and any remnants of dignity. The biggest misconception among the adults swanning about was that children weren't paying attention. They figured you were just play-acting, instead of harnessing the art of observation. Little did they know, you had your finger on the town's pulse. Around them, dismissive giggles covered up your keen mind, making you the ultimate undercover agent with the best seat in the house. You became adept at using every senses to your advantage. Smell was critical. The whiff of fresh pastries could signal a potential job, while the acrid odour of smoke often meant a domestic scrape awaited. Your cunning kept you light on your feet, and with a flick of your ear here or a pressed palm to your cheek there, you avoided prying eyes with remarkable finesse. Eavesdropping became second nature, a part of your identity, stitching you into the fabric of social hierarchy invisible to most. With each secret gleaned, you mastered the fine art of survival, one whisper at a time. After all, in your line of duty, knowledge was power, but discretion was the ultimate ally. With a grin that mixed mischief and innocence, you navigated through the soot-stained shadows of Victorian life, secretly holding all the cards, or at least the ones that had not already become part of the grime. Next time you hear a child say they want to be a spy, remember the chimney-dwelling spies who embrace the delightful art of eavesdropping. You'd be surprised. Your daily life may not be at stake, but if you heard enough secrets, you could rule your very own neighbourhood. You woke early, not to a warm breakfast, but to the terrifying prospect of navigating narrow flues and not passing out. However, like a plucky hero in a cartoon, you would bravely trudge through, earnestly working your way up the ranks, dreaming of one day getting that golden certificate for best chimney clean-up. The sun barely poked its head above the skyline of grimy London, casting an eerie glow over the rooftops. Your stomach did somersaults, partly due to hunger and partly due to the knowledge that your day would begin with a long, cold crawl through soot. What happened to the dream of playing with friendly Fred, the climbing acrobat who sold biscuits on the corner? This was work, a veritable obstacle course of blackened pipes and dangerous twists. As you dressed in your oversized tattered tunic, your new version of ceremonial battle armour, you couldn't help but feel like an underdog going into the fight of your life. Did anyone even appreciate the sacrifice you were about to make for the greater good of a soot-free society? Probably not. But where's the glory in caring for backstabbers who probably never had a decent dinner in their lives? Your dreams of a gigantic, extravagant meal faded quickly as you recalled scurrying to keep your family afloat. Instead, you were handed an awkward wooden hoe during your training, specialising in chimney manoeuvres, how to slip into cramped spaces and crawl back out. With a belly full of nervousness, because who wouldn't be nervous about entering a fireplace for the day, you set off into the streets. The buzzing of early morning merchants filled the air as the townsfolk woke up to begin their daily grind. You, however, were already at work, inching through the shadows toward your first residential call. A modest brick home owned by an imposing lady rumoured to have lived in this neighbourhood long enough to have seen her fair share of soot-covered mischief. The clang of the doorbell felt like a death sentence as you approached, your heart racing and your hands shaking. Did you really want to be a chimney spy? Staring into those gleaming blackened eyes of the chimney, more menacing than the constable on everyone's bad side. You squared your shoulders and let out a small yelp of courage before slipping inside. With every frantic wriggle through the chimney flue, you imagine what your life might have been like had you been born into a family of nice 19th century gentlemen. Lush feasts every evening, endless discussions about the weather, or perhaps just the luxury of wearing clean clothes regularly rather than ones that smelled like a burnt biscuit. Squeezing tighter around corners, your heart raced as you felt lumps and bumps under your knees that could only be described as unfortunate, until, with a deft motion befitting a young professional, you finally arrived at the top. Emerging triumphantly on the other side, you found yourself standing defiantly in the fireplace, ready to bask in your glory. Except, nobody was there to see it. Participants of your triumph were probably too busy avoiding dust to acknowledge the hero of the hour was alive and unscathed. You sighed, dust clouds swirling around you as you recalled an arsenal of motivational speeches from other spies. If only the adults appreciated our hard work, they'd said. Ah well, recognition or not, you were starting your day with pride. Using an old rag to access the thick soot coating every corner, you chuckled over the absurdity of working in such precarious conditions. Grinning now, you thought of how one day this experience might earn you a noteworthy story. Maybe even some cash for pastries. Sure, you'd never be the hero in a sweeping tale of bravery, but you definitely would be the childhood cynic aiding the struggle against defeat. At the end of your labour, with the fireplace now shining brighter than a penny in a well, you felt lighter, not just from the soot that dusted off into oblivion, but from the knowledge that you'd contributed something significant today. And what do you do with that knowledge? You find yourself astoop, crumbling up that last bit of bread neatly packed away, properly enjoying a well-earned seat in the sun after the hard work of day slugging through someone else's home. Even amidst charred confetti, you realised your worth and that of your fellow spies. Perhaps you'd never make it to the life you once dreamt of, but you'd built camaraderie amid the dark, and heroes sprung from everywhere. even from the depths of the flue, with a handful of biscuit crumbs, a dash of courage, and perhaps an occasional shout of "watch out below" every now and then. Wouldn't they be surprised? You'd soon learn that coal dust isn't merely a byproduct of your day job. It's also the most avant-garde makeover trick of the Victorian age. Who knew that all natural ingredients existed for a great contour? Just bury your face in some soot and voila, instant Victorian beauty. The beauty industry, as you might have suspected, was not quite what it is today. There weren't aisle after aisle of fancy creams and splashes. Instead, Victorian ladies were turning to unconventional methods for looking chic. Forget expensive face masks. A staunch lady could spend an afternoon covering herself in coal dust and stride out looking like the Queen of Shadows. Imagine plucking up a piping hot piece of thinking on a Saturday afternoon. "Oh, darling, you look simply ravishing," someone could say, all while assessing the sheen of your coal-flecked visage. In Victorian society, the smoky, sultry look generated from hours of chimney work didn't merely surface, it was celebrated. Ghostly pallor was out. The just crawled out of a chimney look was in. It was like an artistic revolution born in soot-laden flues and tiny bodies covered in blackened coal. You secretly started to understand the appeal. Who needs a sunscreen with SPF when you could add a moody, dramatic flair to your expression? As you found yourself jostling through coaly chutes and darting behind soot-covered walls, a wave of exfoliation swept over you with scrubbing soot as your secret weapon. You know, experts say that scrubbing helps keep the skin youthful, and here you were, an accidental skincare guru steeped deep in manual labour, giving chemical-free a whole new meaning. You might even consider putting beauty savant on your business cards if you had any. The application was full of peculiar excitement. Gather up that coal dust with a touch of dampness and smear it over your face like some elaborate war paint. Not only did you look ready for the most adventurous of escapades, but you also ignited envy among the upper crust, who typically relied on fancy cosmetics to achieve your coal-highlighted glow. But living as a soot-encrusted child had its downsides. One day, as you scampered into the home of a fancy lady, she caught a whiff of you. "Why, what on earth is that smell?" she gasped, her delicate fan sputtering indignantly. There was nothing quite as ungracious as being deemed the walking pile of coal. Perhaps it was time to perfect the art of cleanliness and elevate your artistically sabotaged spirit. The balance between soot-stained charm and social rejection was jarring. The privilege of beauty often came at a dirty price in this grease-laden game. And oh, not just your face would bear the signs. Your nails, once rugged and fierce like a champion fighter, gradually morphed into dark, craggy claws, southern staples of an underground beauty routine turned badge of honour. The elements took a toll, but you sported it with pride, considering it a unique selling point. Sooty fingers? Oh please, child, that's just part of the working-class charm. Somewhere in the depth of your hard tackle against grime lay a peculiar sort of confidence that taught you to own your dirt, quite literally, and foster this inner strength. But alas, being adorned in grime such as coal with a penchant for self-discovery had its challenges, especially as the Victorian society became somewhat cleanliness-obsessed. You might come home to find your mother chastising you. "Bathe, child! You need to wash this coal dust off or you shall never find a suitor." Durable and determined as you were, you soon learned that navigating your world of compressed black was not a total walk in the park, and so you embraced grooming as a life lesson in resilience, presenting your rough exterior as a badge of honour. Beyond the looks, you honed your affectionate views of human beauty. Those who ventured deep into dusty chimneys often emerged intact, embracing the forever-changing nature of societal standards. Cleanliness who? Streamlining beauty through sticky coal created a discord. a unique narrative that questioned the boundaries of beauty and identity. The cloth of well-worn and oft-forgotten sooty remnants became a piece of your story. When you unveiled this new definition of beauty, it was truly a reflection of a generation characterized by hardship, resilience, and unapologetic charm. So, as you made your way through soot-spun life as a chimney spy, you realized that there was beauty in the grime, charisma in the dust, and truth in each sprinkle of coal that swept your way. You were redefining what it meant to be beautiful, one sooty inch at a time. Just when you thought crawling through narrow, soot-covered chimneys couldn't get any more harrowing, life surprises you. What if you got stuck? Picture it. The ungrateful adult yelling about the wasted time. The thrill of nearly being buried alive had its own allure, didn't it? You could practically hear the distant sound of your mother wailing about how Mrs. Thistleton would never let them forget it. Whether you were wedged in a particularly snugly flue or clambering through a narrow shaft, your luck could change faster than you could say foul air. It was almost like a rite of passage, every child whispering urban legends about the poor, unremarkable souls who never made it back to daylight. Imagine the sensation of your heart racing like a runaway dinghy, with shadows bouncing around you, a melange of soot and the faint smell of burnt toast wafting through the darkness. Breathless, with panic tugging at your throat like a persistent cat, you wedged yourself deeper into your workspace. There was zero chance of turning back. It was now or never, and it didn't help that every little sound amplified tenfold. Was that the skitter of mice? Or was your imagination now the villain in this gothic horror narrative? As you claw your way through the flue, you could almost hear the sarcastic taunts from the other children echoing in your mind. Hey, don't get too comfortable. Nobody's ever made it out of that chimney sweep's grave. Haha. The thrill of spooky stories was one way to distract from the ever-present feeling of claustrophobia, settling like a thick layer of dust in your lungs. You jabbed your shoulder against an uneven wall of bricks and prayed to whichever chimney deity was listening that you wouldn't be the next unfortunate cork in a narrow wooden bottle. And then, during your escapades, there were those moments of gritty camaraderie, the times you'd help out your fellow child spies. Nothing drew kids closer than the shared fear of being swallowed by a roof. "If you get stuck in a downspout, I'll come with my broom," you exclaimed to the brave lad next to you, a brother in arms against the shadowy world of coal and grime. Such invigorating promises propelled you into the next round of danger, where the risk of rescue became part of the adrenaline. Day after day in those soot-stained corners of Victorian London, you learned to navigate the hazards of your chosen profession. And when it came to chimney fires, oh dear, the stakes really jumped. Your heart lurched at the thought of an inferno blazing above while you hung tight by your fingertips. You felt like a cartoon character perched precariously atop a ticking time bomb. Did you feel dizzy from both exhilaration and the plume of black smoke curling into your lungs? Probably, but like a child too deep into a show of bravery, you swallowed it down. When nights like these crested into flame-dancing danger, you were faced with a choice. Remain the dutiful child squished in chimney corners, or catapult your way to near mythical status among your friends. The tales of your exploits gained momentum, illustrating your life among the soot-covered shadows. Did you hear about the young lad saved from a fiery chimney by his cat burglar instincts? You could almost hear the whispers wafting through the alleyways. That would be you, revered not through riches but through sheer pluck. And let's not forget the ultimate test of your grit, the clandestine operations you executed with surgical precision. Would you sneak back down a chimney to nab the odd prized toy, or maybe even a remembered trinket that slipped off an adult's mantle? Adventures escalated in scale and boldness, transforming you from a timid child into a legend, if not a distinctly musty one, In the end, you emerged from those perilous excursions covered in grime, far more esteemed than a mere child wearing a soot-edged smile. You were no longer just a chimney spy. You had become a resilient explorer of the hidden tunnels of childhood. And although your spine protested and your knees ached from all that contorting, you carried the swagger of someone who had brushed the edge of life itself. Next time you clambered into a brick-lined wonderland, you could strut like a knight. After all, regular children skipped along flower-laden meadows, but you had adventures beneath the very roofs that sheltered them, and nothing could diminish that exhilarating truth. The unmasked, Victorian challenges, the ingenious tasks of the little ones. You were given tasks that made climbing Mount Everest look like a leisurely stroll. Each time you manoeuvred from one chimney to the next while pretending you weren't hyperventilating. You honed skills that would make you the IKEA expert of squeezing into tight spaces. Forget about the charming adulting roles of the modern world. This was a live-action version of Chimney Olympics, and you were the star athlete. With only moments to mentally prepare yourself, you developed that uncanny ability to hold your breath while contemplating whether today's mission might end in either glorious triumph or an overwhelming panic attack. Upon entering your first chimney, the world transformed into a rough and tumble mess of coal dust and uncertainty. Breathing was an exercise in willpower, as the smothering stench of soot filled your nostrils like a questionable dinner gone wrong. Many kids would shy away from the depths of darkness, yet here you were, the intrepid hero equipped with a cloth to cover your mouth, as if that would do anything to spare you from the lingering aroma of charred remains and stubborn memories of last week's supper. House cats would have wept in envy at your incredible agility, flinging yourself into the relentless void, expertly adhering to the age-old motto, "In dirt we trust, in cleanliness we rust." As you clambered through the cramped flues, you quickly learned how to masterfully dodge all manner of obstacles, sharp-edged bricks, nestling pigeons, and the odd lost sparrow that surely drew the short straw when it came to chimney living. It was an evolution in engineering, with your tiny body becoming the standard for the ideal chimney dweller, perhaps even entering into an unspoken realm of espionage where you had to count on beating the odds. What became vital wasn't only your skill at squeezing into such Saudi Arabian card houses, but also your unique knack for listening in on drinks served at formal gatherings. And so, the art of eavesdropping began. Instead of honing your math skills, you were perfecting the delicate craft of listening to the hoity-toity upper-crust debate, the merits of fine china, or the latest scandal involving the baker's daughter. Did you hear? She was seen dancing on the table. The horror! The world outside your soot-filled universe was one of absurdity. Pure drama, rivalries, and gossip fit for a grand opera, which you couldn't help but snicker about whilst wearing a charcoal-streaked grin beneath your grime. And speaking of absurdity, nothing prepared you for the instructions you'd receive from your chimney master. Some of the tasks sounded eerily like riddles, meant to decipher the mind of an average cat. Scamper over to the North Flue and see if you can locate the missing wedding ring of Lady Featherbottom. Because let's face it, the last time anyone bothered to check a chimney for treasure was probably a few decades ago, when people still thought washing clothes was actually a good idea instead of an audacious endeavour shared between unnecessary work and shame. Of course, it wasn't all just about retrieval missions. On particularly busy days, you'd be tasked with encouraging a small group of soot-covered comrades to support you. Why take just a plain whiff of filth when you could whip up a workforce of determined friends? This clandestine crew quickly learned to keep stock of any errant kittens or snag dinners that escaped from landlady's grasp. Nothing was beneath you all. You were the ultimate recycling unit. Weaving through walls, you snuck the forgotten bits of labour into nifty packages, soot-saturated sauces that had somehow risen to glorified culinary fame amid the melting masses of poorly preserved pot roast. Each day concluded with myriad pseudo-accomplishments masked in sepia-toned warmth of shared stories surrounding supper. You laughed, celebrated little victories, and even begrudged the odd burnt finger while fighting over who would spoon the last crusty remnants from the dinner table. This beautifully elaborate web of survival led you back to an unyielding reflection. How a soot-dusted urchin could pull a rusty grin and no success beyond the washing house. You were more than just a minor detail in ownership's game. You were an enlightening participant in the larger absurdity of it all. So whether you found yourself wolfing down your last morsel, or trading yourself to space like a London-based commando, you learned resilience in adversity's ever-present embrace. Unbeknownst to your distracted overseers, you were not all that different from the incredible feats a grown adult might channel while confronting their very own chimney of daily life. You grinned, smudged with dust. You were, after all, woven into the very fabric of history, one delicate chimney sweep at a time. As you shuffled through the charcoaled abyss, you begrudgingly became a champion of sustainability. Recycling old kitchen scraps for some hasty meals, you realised that whilst the world shunned soul-sucking labour, your lifestyle was inadvertently green before it was cool. It was almost poetic, really. In your dive into the soot-stained chimneys of Victorian London, you, a pint-sized crusader, discovered that every crusty crust of bread and discarded vegetable peel could morph into your midday feast, a sort of culinary alchemy born from survivalist tendencies rather than Pinterest boards. Picture this. Your daily life was a mix of blackened brick and stubborn fog, with each meal made up of the unrecognisable remnants of wealthier folks' noble dinners. Did you just find a pesky potato that had seen better days? Well, look at you. You are now a connoisseur of the I-can-make-this-work diet, meaning dinner could range from better not taste like last week's stew to maybe this potato is still worth the effort. After all, who hasn't feasted on a dubious pesto made from a long-forgotten can of something green? Oh wait, that was just mouldy bread and hope. And let's not forget your debate over who was the real villain here. Was it the wretched aristocracy, overlooking the children literally falling down chimneys, or you, climbing into your grim abode only to find breakfast hiding behind the soot? Afghans were worried about smoke inhalation, but you, a versatile culinary wonder, were ahead of the times. Who needs a meal plan when you had a trash bin to sift through? You were saving the planet one forgotten carrot at a time. Despite the cavalcade of dirt, a strange camaraderie formed amongst fellow chimney spies, with whispered secrets of scavenging techniques and survival tactics. Together you learned that no scrap was too stale, and every meal was a small act of rebellion against a world that dared to overlook your struggle. You would emerge from a chimney covered in grease and grime, yet with the triumphant air of a knight achieving victory in a battle against the forces of waste. Not that anyone noticed. Most just called you the sooty child or smoke monster. The ingenuity required for your daily survival quickly turned into an art form. You became an urban forager without the stylish knapsack or Instagram filters to document your adventures. Instead, your loot consisted of all the food scraps and a side of societal disdain. Chimney Spies can thrive became your rallying cry. Nobles may have had their feasts, but you'd scavenge like a true champion. And who needed rafts of unnecessary packaging and spoiled produce when your daily grind revolved around exploration of the city's gnarled underground? And in conversations with your comrades, it became apparent that you were all building a legacy of resilience that intertwined your everyday lives with moments of inspiration that sparkled like the fresh air above the soot. You all made a pact. Each one held in their grime-covered hearts the earnest dream of a better future. This camaraderie rippled through the filthy air like precious silver, giving you courage to combat both suffocation and exploitation. The best part of it all? Your adventures felt almost heroic. Every time you successfully scavenged your meal, it echoed tales of inner strength, worthy of immortalizing in song. Sooty battle hymns floated through the neighborhoods in your imagination. "You're not just a child, you're a survivor," whispered the wind. Engaging in everyday survival became the ultimate game of strategy. You hid from angry homeowners while crafting meals like an underground chef. Curdled milk, suspicious onions, and potentially emotional broccoli created an innovative take on volatile sack dinners. Who needed a Michelin star when you could dazzle the ruffians ruling the playground with your culinary prowess? In the grand narrative of history, you stood proudly resilient, wearing your soot-coated badge of honour. As you shuffled through the haze of hard labour and lifted some shreds of fresh air that dared seep past the grime, you broke through the false notion that childhood equals innocence. You resided within the dream of survival, and in the shadows created a legacy of sustainability filled with dirt, hope, and masochistic glimmers of ingenuity. And so, Dances Through the Ash, champion of the Forgotten Children's Alliance, moulded a vision that thrived amidst the darkness, sneaking behind your ultimate mantra: when life gives you soot, make a soup. Because who knew that being a chimney spy could lead to recycling before recycling was a thing? You were not just breathing life into the dirty air, you were pulling the entire world along with you. And chimney blazing triumph, the secret life of heroes. You imagined yourself as a plucky hero, not just cleaning fireplaces but going on daring adventures. Each time you pulled out a singing bird from a flue like a magician, you knew you might just crack a smile or two and get a couple of extra pennies from the grateful family. That feeling of triumph, akin to uncovering buried treasure, was intoxicating. Between you and the end of the day was a world filled with cobwebs and mystery, the uncharted realms of the chimney world awaiting your eager hands. As you bravely crawled into the narrow flues, the darkness enveloped you like a fluffy, soot-filled blanket, providing its own kind of comfort. In this cramped world, you transformed from a child in rags to a soldier in soot, destined to conquer the sooty kingdoms of Victorian London. In between your heroic escapades, you embraced your role as master of disguise. Not quite a spy, but perhaps a muckier version of one. With every daring venture down the gnarled shaft, you dreamt of being the next Robin Hood. Except instead of robbing the rich, you were just trying to stay alive long enough to celebrate a job well done. The best part, of course, was the thrill of discovery. Each chimney told a story, bursting with secrets. There were precious remnants of half-eaten pies nearly begging you to munch on them, crumbled notes from middle-class sweethearts, and perhaps the occasional long-lost toy. And let's not forget every childhood's treasure, the odd assortment of shiny coins that sometimes clinked beneath your knees. You dodged soot and soothed your conscience with delightful thoughts of being a chimney-dwelling hero. But there was another side to this thrill. Danger was a constant companion. The risks were real, lurking like shadows in the corners of your mind. The whispers of young chimney sweeps lost in accidents haunted you. It made you think twice before launching yourself into another tight flue. What if today was the day you became just another cautionary tale? The irony wasn't lost on you. While the world viewed you as a lowly child, you held the fate of entire households in your tiny, gritty fingers. It was a strange kind of power when you thought about it, but the pressure was as heavy as the soot coating your skin. This era also came with its share of twists you couldn't have imagined. Twice a week you donned your softest singed clothing and decided to become a spy of sorts, keeping an eye on neighbours while sweetly flicking your soot-stained cap upon your head. You started gathering juicy intel, observing the goings-on of your neighbourhood's elite. Were Mr. Jenkins and his wife really feuding, or was that just a dramatic moment in their seasonal play? This newfound role let you straddle the line between child and adult, unruly and privileged at the same time. Indulgent fantasies filled your little mind, merging your duties with those of the town's noblemen. You could feel the tension simmering beneath your feet, the possibility of revolution waiting to pop up like crackling embers in an unattended hearth. Those moments when you scurried through and around the chimneys became epic journeys. It was as if you were rewriting your very own hero's saga. Suddenly, the children of chimney sweeps weren't just children anymore. They were your sidekicks, fellow rebels armed with nothing more than imagination and a pinch of friendliness, along with a spark of rebellion. Yet, reality would also triumph over your daydreams. Eventually, one too many scuffed knees and overheated conversations with the family cat would draw the line between adventure and routine. Mornings turned into afternoons filled with drudgery until the end of each workday beckoned. It was easy to trade tales of daring heroism with your fellow chimney sweeps, but the truth always fizzled down to one undeniable fact. Very few made it out of the soot-strewn underbelly clean or unscathed. Each triumphant return amid cheers felt like a stark reminder of just how fleeting and precarious this chimney spy lifestyle was. Even so, with each climb, each extraction of a forgotten trinket from the void, you carried deep inside a defiant sense of glory. You left a legacy of mud-slick triumphs embodied by generations of tiny heroes. As darkened heroes of soot, you forged bravery from coal dust, wobbling yet proud. And so the stories of chimney spy escapades lived on in whispers among children across the city, gradually growing into something much larger than they originated from, a legacy waiting to flourish in the hearts of future generations. Through toil, hardship, and a touch of fantasy, you weren't just cleaning chimneys, you were crafting a narrative, ensuring your part in this smoky adventure wouldn't fade away into mere ashes. What's that weird smell? The aromatic disasters of a kid's spy. Just imagine the scent of burnt wood and ash clinging to your skin like a bad relationship. Your uniqueness, however, made you an irresistible scent to parents who had abandoned their fancy perfumes. Now you were part human, part charred tree. How delightful. As you scampered up and down the soot-filled passages of Victorian chimneys, that distinctive aroma became your defining feature. Not that you had a choice in the matter, mind you. No one was running a sensational campaign for increased popularity in the playground. Instead, other children would recoil in horror every time you approached, mumbling about how you smelled like an improperly extinguished bonfire. You became an unwitting vase for coal-dusted clichés with a side of lamentable hygiene. But there's more to this aromatic adventure. Picture the everyday challenges that came with being a chimney spy. First off, how do you explain your oddly pungent essence to well-meaning adults? Imagine a stern, Victorian-era gentleman tipping his hat and asking, "What is that peculiar smell?" Do you simply reply with a shrug? Or do you get creative, declaring that you are handpicked as the official coal ambassador of your neighbourhood? "I bring the flavour of the hearth, good sir. Would you like some as a condiment on your next meal?" That's a conversation starter for the ages, and a delightful way to deflect suspicion about your own personal hygiene. Just think about the intriguing smells that permeated your working life. The rich, inviting scent of drying laundry mixed with the bitter sting of burnt coal and the occasionally ominous wafts of rotting cabbage from the nearby markets. Every breath delivered a bouquet of smells designed to keep even the hardiest of noses on their toes. Who needed perfume when you could emit a chrysanthemum of odours, playing a perpetual guessing game with your own nostrils? Was that last whiff coal? Or was it the unfortunate fish that leapt from the vendor's cart earlier that day, only to meet its demise under the wheel of a passing carriage? At the end of the day, how could you avoid the inevitable conclusion that personal grooming was clearly not a priority in your line of work? A quick glance in a reflective surface, a cracked glass perhaps, wouldn't yield the sprightliness of a fresh-faced child. No, you would see a chimney-smeared vision of a child championing smell over good sense. Your hair resembled a rug that had withstood years of neglect, and your clothes were nothing more than a patchwork of soot, stains. They might have been once-coloured fabric, but they had long surrendered to the mighty touch of darkness. All this, of course, tied into the expectations of being a chimney spy. You had a vocation to uphold. According to the gossip on the street corners, you were essentially the patron saint of soot, who needed to cover up an embarrassing aroma when what you were truly creating was an aura, a mythical scent, capable of warding off unwanted company. Perhaps you were destined for future fame as the very essence of the Victorian working class. But along with your aromatic woes came unexpected advantages. When the other kids tossed aside their pears and apples, you could easily reclaim the uneaten snacks with hardly a second thought. Who would dare approach the chimney-scented wonder when they had so many other options? Only the bravest, or perhaps the most oblivious of classmates, would be willing to risk olfactory disgust for a mere afternoon nibble. You became quite the knight in potato-scented armour, defending the pleasantries of your dwindling meals. And let's not forget the moments when you did get a whiff of a sweet fragrance without the threatening undertones of your home chimney, like the rare occasion a kind shopkeeper might place a cookie in your palm for a job well done. You'd savour those moments like a summer breeze wafting through the stench of coal, reminding you of distant memories of innocence, laughter, and maybe even some time spent on a swing. Those fleeting hints of sugar were like golden currency amidst your mingling scents. You were practically the wealthiest kid on your block. In the end, while your unique scent may have left an indelible mark on every situation you encountered, it never defined your spirit. As a chimney spy, you embraced your aromatic disasters with the sense of identity. You were not merely an ash-stained child, but a fierce agent of adventure, traversing the smoky realms of London with pride, stumbling through aromas, yes, but inadvertently paving the way for children's stories far and wide. You gathered on street corners like tiny sitching conspirators sharing tales from the flue. Your camaraderie grew as you realised that aside from darkened tactics and clandestine meetings, you also shared a love for adventure, even if it ended badly, most of the time. You formed a ragtag coalition of chimney spies, often called the Society of Soot, or so you dramatically dubbed it, even if no one really agreed. The fly-by-night escapades turned every day into a thrilling jaunt through cobblestone streets, flues, and forgotten back alleys, although your society could probably fit under a single well-placed hat, considering your modest numbers. Your highlights included stealthily intervening in neighbourhood happenings like a wild band of misfits turned urban ninjas. Whether it was overhearing some adult grumbling about taxes or spying on maiden gossip about who was sneaking pastries from the town baker's cart, you felt like tiny detectives in trench coats. Sometimes these super-secret missions meant crawling through sooty interiors, but other times it involved just hanging around markets, trying, and mostly failing, to be inconspicuous enough to avoid parental wrath. Tell me, isn't being a child filled with limitless imagination and questionable organisation skills exactly like being a detective? And then there was the point of collaboration. It always began at the local bakery, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with your enthusiastic chatter, or rather, your detailed plotting to steal leftover bread when Mrs. Thompson turned her back. Sure, you might have been stealing. It was technically sneaky, but you justified it by saying hygiene was secondary after all that coal dust. No child should ever starve, you reasoned. solemnly chewing on day-old baguettes pulled from the trash. This was your way of developing street smarts. You were practically pioneers in the art of opportunistic eating. But every misadventure came with a lurking sense of danger. During one particularly ambitious operation, one that would surely end up in your memoirs someday, your group managed to infiltrate Lord Abernathy's estate. It was an impressive operation, though not without its flaws. As you peeked into the grand but grimy mansion through dusty windows, you could hear the dull clang of spoons against fragile china. What secrets were they hiding, you wondered, the chief question of your group echoing through the air. Was it bad tea or something more scandalous, like an unusual fondness for glittering belt buckles? But alas, intrigue can come to an end faster than you can say chimney sweep. As you peeked inside, the Lord's old huntsman, possibly with more scruff and grit than 100 chimneys combined, alerted his master. The thrilling chase that followed sent your heart racing faster than soot could escape a flue. With blood pounding in your ears and whispers of burnt pastries trailing behind you, you sprinted down alleyways, darting through gardens sweaty and soot-encrusted, much like the very rat that facilitated your escape. There's bravery in fleeing, you would tell your fellow spies later, as you bandaging up a scraped knee from this hurried exit. Or at least it counts as cardio. The laughter bonded you all tighter than your grime-covered attire. Each near miss only reinforced your afternoon spent huddled together, consuming leftover pastries while swapping tales of narrow escapes and near disasters. Those meetings became sacred moments amidst a life of soot and sweep. You discovered a kindred spirit in your fellow spies, and a rare gratitude for the havoc you caused. Each adventure brought out your shared humanity, growing more robust than the dirty business of chimney sweeping. You became a band of brothers and sisters. Not that you had any siblings. What are siblings compared to co-conspirators? Facing down the mundane horrors of your world, especially the adult condescension that tormented your tiny hearts. In the end, it wasn't just about the mischief. It was also about surviving the social ladder of the soot and grime. Together. You hadn't just formed a coalition. You had forged a new family. With every flue-cleaning tale swapped over stale bread, you created connections that breathed life into forgotten corners of London, often underscored by the slightly less than appealing scent of the very charcoal you habitually dwelled among. In a society that often overlooked the tiny ones, you gathered courage and unity to rise up, transforming your soot-laden destiny into something ignited with adventure, albeit with a few singed eyebrows along the way. So remember, as you lie in your comfy bed tonight, relieved by your modern comforts, whisper a little cheer for the adventurous kids of the past who made spying in chimneys a remarkable oddity, while surviving to tell the tale with bright-eyed laughter. What a strange life it was, filled with moments both bitter and sweet, a reminder that even the tiniest conspiracies forge the largest connections. You noticed a change in the air, a spark of rebellion rising among your soot python friends. Fueled by dramatic tales of oppressive work, you found strength in numbers. What happens when kids lead a strike against their chimney masters? Will you become powerful, or merely more terrified? The streets of Victorian London weren't just bustling with coal smoke and gossip. They were charged with the winds of change, and it felt like the kind of revolution that could make history. If only history bothered to notice little folks like you. With embers of discontent slowly igniting into flames, you and your fellow chimney spies huddled together, plotting not just for the day's rights, but for a future free of suffocating soot. As you huddled, exchanging whispers over stale bread, you began crafting an agenda worthy of a proper uprising. First on the list, that ancient dust-coated idea of better pay. After all, what kind of twisted society found it acceptable to pay children with fewer coins than buttons? You envisioned a shiny coin that said, "I'm not a chimney, I'm a human." You could practically taste the freedom on your tongue. The assembled kids nodded in camaraderie, agreeing it was time to demand your hard-earned wages, even if hard included more crawling than actual labour. Then came the questions. What would happen if the chimney masters refused? The idea sent shivers up your little spine. Would they retaliate with threats, or simply send you into the deepest, darkest flue of all? The possibilities kept you awake at night, not that the soot in your eyes allowed any actual sleep anyway. Each withered excuse sent a chill through the group. No more smoke breaks, no more snacks. Your small gang, bandits of the soot, assured each other that no matter the outcome, every voice mattered, even if it was croaked like an ill-fated crow. Distancing from fear, your plans grew into resonant rebellion. A rally was born. It just so happened that the end of a long, grueling week matched up perfectly with Saturday, the only day parents mostly forgot about chores. And wouldn't you know it, an empty square awaited like a stage amidst the bustle of London life. Excitedly, you thrummed with anticipation, while precariously holding on to the memory of warm bread and, let's not forget, your unsung heroism. A spotlight on the unsuspecting chimney masters would do wonders for morale. Under the cover of twilight, you lured your fellow chimney spies with promises of free flow and applause. Pure seduction for hard-working mini-activists. Once gathered, you took centre stage, kicking off with battle speeches borrowed from overdramatic neighbourhood adults, infusing every exaggerated tone with a hint of rebellion. "We are not mere children. We are the future," you declared, raising your tiny fists like a pint-sized warrior, bravely standing for rights while managing to misplace the entire following line of your script somewhere down a flue. Reality checking sharply returned when a flock of disinterested pigeons landed around you as if they were the unimpressed audience of a failed street show. But, confidence sparked an innate courage in your heart, and therein lies the beauty of a united front. It's hard to remain disheartened when 7 other kids raise their ragged voices in unison. You bolstered speeches for freedom, wreaking havoc on the passive agreement of silence echoing through London streets. Whatever resulted, your collective voice should not be snuffed out like a flickering candle. Unexpectedly, a chimney master appeared, primarily curious at first. Concern stirred in your adolescent chest. Who knew adults could be so ominous? How dare an overlord approach? But instead of silencing you with grunts, he stood, silent and shock-struck, presumably recalling the last time he had managed to clean out a flue while tying his own shoelaces. As the master heard the impending drama unravel, you dared to present your demands urgently. The winds of change howled just outside your ears. Yet herein lies the crux of being young and driven by ideology. Sometimes change comes slower than a coal-laden cart. By week's end, the master hadn't cracked. The adults still scoffed at your chants, but whispers thrummed above the chimney smoke, and the resilient comrades rallied behind your cause. Perhaps not every movement needed to be victorious, but you planted the seeds for change amongst soot-smeared hearts. With every courageous act, every daring cry, you felt like those pigeons on the ledge, watching, waiting, and hoping for flight. You were not just chimney spies anymore. You were activists in the making, fueled by mere mortal wishes for a better tomorrow. And oh, what better tomorrow awaited. Your childhood dreams took shape in the fires of camaraderie. A tide of hope rose as every daring child turned towards the horizon. Who knew rebellion could taste immeasurably sweet, even if totally smeared in coal? Further endeavours awaited, and while they weren't assured victories, standing together felt significantly more powerful than enduring the oppressive silence of oppression. Together your impacts would echo wherever chimney smoke billowed in the city. After all, today, rebellious hearts soared, and tomorrow, who knew what those courageous hearts could achieve? The soot topos, fashion meets formidable. You began to notice the peculiar intersection between style and peril. Grimy, misfit capes and uniforms adorned forgotten stars of children's fashion. Thus, the soot topos represented not only survival, but also an ill-fated desire to be the trendsetter, all while covered in the remains of your work. As you climbed up and down the soot-stricken ladders of your neighbourhood, you wrestled with the cringe-worthy reality that you were a walking, breathing advertisement for Victorian coal. You might as well have been walking the runway of a dumpster fire, where the only accessory was a hefty layer of grease and grime. Imagine this, your fellow chimney spies strutting their stuff, proudly donning outfits that were less about haute couture and more about haute disaster. Your ensemble was a unique blend of soot-streaked rags and vaguely recognisable remnants of what garment makers would call a tunic. Not that there was ever a chance for bespoke tailoring. Good luck getting a dressmaker's attention when you're living in a world where it's fashionable to wear the evidence of your work like a Medal of Honour. Your determination to stand out among the soot-covered kids was admirable, if utterly misguided. After all, standing out in a crowd of similarly grimy bodies felt a bit like winning a gold medal in a very messy Olympics. Your fellow spies found ways to up their fashion game. One child remarkably secured a small feather, perhaps borrowed from a pigeon that didn't quite escape the filthy hands of fate, and affixed it to the bit of fabric slipping off their shoulder. "Look at me," they'd bellow, their bravado boldly outshining their abysmal laundry skills. "A chimney spy with style." And in this warped sense of achievement, you felt a flicker of aspirational camaraderie. Still, the shadows of true fashion haunted you. You'd see the wealthy children on the other side of the street, fully equipped with bells and whistles, riding around in carriages as if they had skinned an entire flock of lambs for fashion tips. Their clothes were made from materials that would make your ragged tunic weep in embarrassment. This disparity weighed heavily in your mind, like a tattered wool cape soaked in water. It was clear. Their parents weren't stuffing them into chimneys for a buck. Instead, these kids were induced into playing croquet, sipping tea, and practicing elegance. Meanwhile, you and your soot topos were busy climbing through suffocating flues, questioning if it's too late to take up knitting instead. But ultimately, you embraced your rightful place among the dishevelled ranks of soot-clad heroes. The soot primes would become the rustic chic of future trendsetters. You could already hear the call of the next generation, "Dare to be dirty." And then the inevitable happened. A sudden shift of fate struck like a brush with chimney dust. One day, an overzealous chimney inspector and iron-faced man with a moustache like a bristlebrush arrived precisely when an unpolished group of chimney spies raised their tails and donned their most illustrious "it's not actually dirty" poses. "Well, my fine little soot collections," he remarked dryly, scanning your assembly as if considering purchasing all of you for his next science fiction book. "What have we here?" At that moment you realised beneath the heavy layer of industrial muck and misfit clothes, there was perhaps a lesson to be learned. There was power in the dirt, camaraderie in the grime, and maybe, just maybe, enough wit to turn your industry into art. To find a way to brand yourself in the minefield of soot, elevating your status from wretched poor chimney child to a peculiar protector of Victorian fashion trends. As you made your way home that evening, you felt a new sense of ambition. Maybe, you thought, you could lead the next ragged fashion revolution. Surely people, those poor souls oblivious to the fresh scent of coal dust, would come to see the brilliance of your smoky steps. The choir of tiny voices hummed in your ears, echoing with solidarity, and for the first time you truly embraced being a soot topo, You skirted home, dreaming of a fashion brand that would mark a new era, emblazoned with the slogan, "Soot, the original black." And maybe, just maybe, someone would immortalise you as the quintessential fashion icon, simply because you weren't afraid to crawl through the abyss to find yourself, style included. Ironically, you became the cleanest dirty child around. After all, your profession was strictly about making sure smoky crevices were scrubbed free. But did anyone ever acknowledge your conflicting lifestyle choices? Being eternally filthy with alarming elegance became your calling card. You'd strut around with the confidence of a child star on the red carpet, exuding an aura of sophistication honed from daily coal and grime. "Who uses soap?" you'd cackle to your soot-laden comrades. "My charm is the only form of polish I need." As you flitted between various households, you quickly learned that being a chimney spy wasn't just about grueling labour. It was also a delicate dance with class expectations, where soot-stained children were surprisingly less welcome than dirty floors. You'd strive for cleanliness, hopping from flue to flue like a small grease-slicked gazelle, much to the chagrin of the household maids who would find you half-baked and fully caked in black. They'd clutch their pearls, lamenting the imposition of this child-afflicted dirt upon their polished homes. But they wouldn't get too angry. After all, you were basically living art. No one could deny the aesthetic value of a grungy angel flitting through Victorian parlours. Now let's not overlook the imaginative ways you navigated daily scrubbing duty. Every chimney you squeezed through was a cavernous battleground of soot that danced like a mischievous shadow on your cheeks. Each time you emerged with a triumphant fistful of debris, it was akin to holding a trophy for your meticulous cleaning endeavours, a blackened tribute to your craftsmanship. Do parents really understand the complex brilliance behind their children's innovative use of soot as a creative aesthetic tool? Perhaps not. But clearly some art requires necessary sacrifice, even if it's the sacrifice of your own cleanliness. Speaking of artistry, your outfits were not only a declaration of stylistic rebellion, they were a testament to your unyielding spirit as a chimney spy. Durable trousers adorned with patches from neighbours' disused drapery flapped stylishly against your soot-stained body. Every thread told a story. The vest you wore fashioned from your uncle's old coat, a staple in the life of a chimney diplomat. And don't bother asking where the collar went. It's probably nesting in the very flue you just cleaned. Perhaps the most significant irony lay in the fact that the act of becoming clean in a Victorian household meant erasing all signs of your life. After a long day of grueling labour scuttling through narrow brick passageways, finally stepping into the sunlight felt a bit symbolic, didn't it? Victorians appreciated cleanliness. For them, domesticity meant fresh linens and fragrant soap. Yet here you were, plopping down into gardens passed over by families preened and polished to perfection, stinking of soot and grime, awkwardly glorious. And then came the sheer absurdity of your world. Every household's closed doors held secrets you weren't supposed to hear. But hey, that's part of the charm of your profession. You were often appalled by the petty squabbles and romantic entanglements swirling among upper crust folks. "Just a cuppa, ladies, and let's leave the dirty laundry for sorting later," you snickered as you listened from your perch in the chimney, straining to memorise every detail. Meanwhile, it was entirely likely that no one would ever recognise this cover of dirt for the chronicles of high society resting within. So why strive for cleanliness at all? It boiled down to your growing sense of irony. The better you mastered the subtleties of domesticity, the more adeptly you could indulge in your secret life. You were a true connoisseur of class stratification, navigating a world where appearances mattered, and yet inside those soot-choked caverns, You were both invisible and entirely essential. Like a dapper ghost in a dusty manor, you understood that while you may be the epitome of dirtiness, your existence brought a kind of unrefined charm that the upper echelons could only hope to replicate. As you reflected on your life as a chimney spy, you discovered that being the cleanest dirty child belonged more to the art of survival than mere appearance. Your soot-laden exploits became your calling card, a unique oddity in a world obsessed with pristine perfection. Rather than hope for appreciation, you embraced your quirks, thrived in your mysteries, and became a master of good-natured dirt. After all, if life gives you coal, make art from it. As of Sweeps and Secrets, navigating family ties. At the heart of your youthful escapades lay unyielding family connections. Every week you learned the ins and outs of family life through balked duty and broomstick banter. No family dinners, you were involved in connections tighter than chimney pipes. You see, in the world of Chimney Spies, your family was not just your blood. They were your allies, your accomplices, and, on occasion, your main rivals in the battle for who could sneak into the tightest flues. In this peculiar realm, being born into a family of sweeps not only determined your destiny, but also held the keys to your survival. Your earliest memories served as a crash course in gameplay, dictated by the unvarnished rules of the trade, loyalty above all else, and no one gets left behind. Your mother, a rugged woman covered in soot from her shift, embodied a certain fierce determination, ensuring that your little hands were always equipped with a brush and a sense of responsibility. She had tales as invigorating as the coal dust she brewed her tea with, stories of familial exploits in the heart of London, where even the rafters whispered secrets that only the sharpest of young ears could hear. Beneath the grime, there was humour to be found as you crammed into the dust-laden fittings of your childhood home, where each room nearly doubled as a broom closet. Sure, sharing space with siblings felt like living in a coal bunker. You learned to navigate the chaos with agility that rivaled the nimbleness it took to inch around the curved walls of a flue. The morning ritual involved trading snickers and jabs about the latest curfew infringements, or who smelled like an unwashed chimney pot. But those playful quips carried weight, forging bonds between you and your brothers and sisters that acted like protective armour against the unforgiving world of spies and city life. You learned quickly that family ties weren't just for comfort. They were your ticket to survival, as you all danced the fine line of indoor mischief and outside duties. You'd huddle around dinner tables constructed from chests that housed the tools of your trade, your only meals being hearty stews that would fuel your frail bodies for hours. You traded tales of your daily mishaps for an extra bite of bread, envisioning a life beyond the soot, perhaps becoming a gallant champion in some grand epic, or more likely, the hero who managed to escape the clutches of the chimney. On one particularly raucous evening, you overheard whispers about an instant bond formed between two swivelling ladies as you clambered up the chimney to spy on the neighbours. How exciting, you thought. You were an active participant in a game far beyond mere chores that echoed even after you retired to bed. How often did your family gather to share secrets, and how you all got each other through those dark days entirely dependent on one another. Eventually you learned to smooth over the small skirmishes with a knowing nod or a cheeky grin. There was rivalry in the air, but it was the kind that reminded you that no chimney was too high when you had a tightly knit family. Such camaraderie led to unforgettable battles against looming house duties, making each family member feel necessary in a land of invisibility. And then came the potentially disastrous time when you found yourself compelled to worm your way into the narrowest, gnarled, sooty pipe, despite your siblings cautioning you. It would become a glorious tale of bravery, of brothers and sisters banding together against the adversities that assailed you each day. While stark horror loomed at how close you were to being lost in the darkness, your gut instinct screamed for you to seek the light. It was, after all, a familial obligation to keep one another safe. Flying through the flue became less a task of dusting than a thrilling escapade. A dizzying race against time lit by the promise that you and your family would always emerge victorious. As age crept up on you, you began to realise that the inexplicable warmth of family bonds shaped you into a spirit of resilience, feeding your appetite for life beyond soot and coal. A life filled with promise and laughter, threaded together with quirks and love. Navigating the labyrinth of family ties, you carried with you an unshakable truth. In this precariously perched world, it was family who made the tribulations of chimney spying worthwhile. And while your days as a chimney spy may eventually fade, the laughter, lessons and love shared among your soot-stained comrades would echo through your history forever. Every mission came with the threat of discovery. But what was worse? The ire of an angry homeowner or the inevitable shaming from your mother? The thrill of sneaking around and facing down childhood fears became synonymous with the work you embraced. Every day posed new challenges. As you hugged the edges of soot-laden walls, your heart raced like a galloping horse on a bumpy cobblestone road. You knew that one wrong move could spell disaster, though, let's be honest, in this case, disaster often meant simply having to wash your clothes a tad more often than your peers. Navigating the treacherous terrain of Victorian chimneys felt like a dangerous game of Twister gone awry. Your little limbs squeezed through tight openings that seemed designed by a mad architect with a penchant for claustrophobia. You remember those sighs of relief whenever you managed to avoid a cascade of soot rushing at you like an angry mob. With each successful maneuver, your confidence grew, making you feel invincible, if only for a fleeting moment before clambering back down into the murky depths. And what about the ominous shadows that danced along the chimney walls? Your imagination ran wild, conjuring spectres of chimney ghosts and angry soot sprites. Every creaky sound morphed into a potential nightmare, triggering your inner daredevil. Did you ever wonder if steampunk leprechauns lurked in the corners, waiting to swipe your nightmarish backpack of dust? But fear not. The adrenaline rush fueled your every search, fueling your determination to soldier boldly into the unknown. Climbing into the darkened abode of a mystery meant playing the role of the unknowing detective, gathering intel about the lives of those living beneath you. Did Mr. Grumblebottom cheat at cards? Was Mrs. Fluffins dating a chimney sweep with questionable intentions? These thrilling insights were the currency among child spies, exchanged during hasty whispers, while standing bedraggled among your soot-caked friends. You quickly discovered that the biggest challenge of being a chimney spy wasn't just sneaking around. It was about managing the inscrutable expectations of the adults outside the soot-drenched symphony of secrets. You were supposed to reinforce their notion of working children, albeit with a healthy sprinkling of rebellion hidden within your blank eyes. Each day felt like an audition for a part in a dreadful play where no one spoke but you. And trust me, you weren't getting an Academy Award. And let's not forget the moments where you found out just how resourceful imagination could be. You'd conjure a whole network of operatives in your head to sabotage an angry adult. You imagined disguises, codename redacting, and eavesdropping galore. You might have even crafted your spy gadget out of left-behind twigs or an old button, pretending that it could unlock a vault of secrets. Oh, the stories you would tell. What a feeling knowing you were in the field and ready for shenanigans! But sometimes the fear factor reached its peak, especially when the ominous footsteps of the homeowner echoed from the ground below. Let me assure you, nothing could compare to that heart-pounding moment you found yourself wedged between a chimney and sheer panic as a disgruntled homeowner yelled, "Who's there?" the breath caught in your throat as adrenaline surged through your tiny vessel. You mastered effective panic strategies quickly. Hold your breath, cling to the soot, and pray for the power of invisibility. Of course, the reaction from your peers added to the wonderfully twisted sense of camaraderie you all shared. When one of the spies was caught, an unspoken agreement loomed around. Would you all rush to one another's aid or simply throw someone under the soot-riddled bus? A complicated moral tale settled in your soul as you strategized how to maintain your notorious reputation while preserving allies in crime. Who knew some of your fellow spies were also budding drama queens? Together you formed a unique tribe who faced off against the brick-and-mortar gods of chimney-lined walls. Sudden blips of laughter and shared sighs paved the way for a bond that was more durable than even the dirtiest soot. Yes, you ran risks and potentially faced the wrath of both adult homeowners and the overbearing judgment of your mothers, but your vital pursuit often felt like a cross between a Victorian spy epic and a childhood adventure. In those moments you realised fear didn't signify failure. Instead, it was a tool, a double strike of adrenaline and self-discovery that transformed you into someone extraordinary. Each adventure in those soot-choked passages was about reclaiming the essence of play, even in a world that insisted you were a mere child labourer with an unfortunate future. Because at the end of the day, you weren't simply a chimney spy. You were a fearless child exploring the hidden corners of life, painting unexpected stories with shades of soot and courage. Sexes. The Orphans' Alliance. Finding hope. Amid the soot, surrounded by coal-stained walls, you embrace different players on this stage, your companions all wrestling with their profound traumas. The beauty of solid friendships during darkness, like shared dreams amid smoke, shone through. Suddenly, every invisible bond felt like hope. It was a surreal camaraderie, built on shared experiences of navigating grimy flues and suffocating dust clouds. You'd share whispers of excitement, tales of daring escapes from narrow spaces, and moments when you almost got a lick of bread for your hard work. In this world, friendship was essential, more so than in any ordinary childhood playground. Your fellow chimney spies had become like siblings, forged in the fires of collective struggle. There was Matty, the joker of your little band, who could always make you laugh even when the ashes in your lungs felt darker than your fate. Then there was Lizzie, brave as a lion cub, who could fit into the tightest spaces and steal crumbs from the rich without batting an eye. "Remember when old Mr. Jenkins tried to sweep us out of his chimney like so much soot?" She'd laugh, her eyes sparkling amid the grime. "I almost got stuck and he almost had a heart attack. What a day!" You could laugh at these absurdities then. In a very real way, laughter became a shield against the relentless undercurrent of desolation that threatened to drag each of you under. But it wasn't just this camaraderie that shaped you. It was the shared, unspoken knowledge of your status as orphans, the untouchables in a society obsessed with success and status. Each day felt like a never-ending endurance test, just you and your squad against the world. Though everyone was trapped in different prison-like homes, you were all listening to the same dark music, the sound of looming unemployment, hunger, and hope dwindling as quickly as the last light of day filtering through the soot-covered sky. Of course, the other children on the streets often didn't understand. They played games that seemed to necessitate innocence, joy. You were knee-deep in survival, tiptoeing through the coal-dusted void of every chimney you climbed into. Oh yes, your life was gritty, but shared laughter threaded through every frayed, silken moment, creating a tapestry of bitter-sweet affection. While you were supposed to be learning how to clean out grit, what you learned instead was how to nurture the glimmers of humanity when it was coldest beneath the soot. Imagine the exhausting but exhilarating moments spent huddled around the dim glow of a meagre candle after a long day of sneaking through the chimneys, licking your sooty fingers as you nibbled on crumbled old bread. "What if we started a club?" Matty suggested one night, eyes twinkling. "We can have secret meetings about our adventures and set out to become the best spies London has ever seen." You couldn't help but giggle. The idea was as ridiculous as it was heartwarming. Naming your club the Sooty Orphans Alliance wasn't just about camaraderie. It was a battle banner in the architectural war against despair. The bond you shared became both your shield and your rallying cry. And so, through the darkest corners of your existence, you were each other's strength. You felt brave against a backdrop of history in the making, paving the way for small victories, snatching tiny bits of joy and holding on to fleeting moments amid the chaos. Yes, there were terrible days, but even the starkness of their reality didn't breach the invisible walls built like ramparts around your hearts. Beyond surviving, you held the knowledge that those coal-streaked smiles shared among you would lead to something more profound, a secret alliance of forgotten children, all united against impoverished fates. You inspired one another, and while the elder ones worried about the whims of an adult-centric society, you nurtured dreams of transforming the world from chaos to colour. Reflecting on these fleeting moments, nestled among your ragtag band of comrades, you'd nod in agreement as one of the others sketched grandiose plans about future trades, eventual escapes, and perhaps a day when no child would ever dream of becoming a chimney spy again. Suddenly, hope felt accessible, tangible even, like breathing in the promise of a brighter dawn just before the first light, a phoenix rising proudly from the soot. And so you forged ahead, leaving behind a trail of resilient friendship in a shadowy world, echoing secrets and laughter, because if life gave you coal, you'd make diamonds, wouldn't you? Chimney blues. The hidden mental tolls of the job. Operating under a society that barely afforded children suffering from the blues, you learn to navigate the mental toll of such work. With no time for dreams of dresses and daydreams, you strapped on a brave grin, hushing your chaotic mind in the pursuit of adventure. Sure, you were a chimney spy, full of mischief and grit, but that didn't mean you didn't feel the weight of the soot-loaded world above your head, pressing down hard on your little shoulders like a dozen brick layers. Every crawl through those narrow flues was an exercise in resilience, but it also offered an exclusive peek into the darker corners of adulthood, revealing that growing up isn't just about learning to tie your shoes. Oh no, it's about mastering the fine art of squashing your feelings down like a king pushing a peasant aside. A delicate sport for any child, especially when your next mission sends you scuttling through the remnants of last week's holiday pudding. The other kids might have filled their heads with delightful stories or imaginary treasures, but for you, each day started with the same heavy dread. Will this be the day I find myself trapped in a dark, sooty chamber, never to be seen again? It was like being a horror movie star, except in your case, no one was filming, and the only audience was a family blissfully unaware that their chimney cleaner had become another one of those tragic tales whispered about in cold markets. Navigating the mindset of a chimney spy meant amassing a skill set you hardly knew you needed. Who knew that sidestepping personal anxiety and sheer terror would become second nature? Each time a house guest laughed and a shadow loomed behind the flue, your heart raced like the world's worst Guess Who game. Please don't reveal my secret, you'd mentally plead to the smoke as your heart continued thumping wildly, hoping that the family would stay blissfully ignorant of your shaky existence for just a bit longer. Yet there were perks, weren't there? As a secret agent, you were privy to the chatter, the gossip, the undercurrents of adult life that made you feel powerful, even as you crouched beneath the hearth. The missed romances, the family dramas, and the whispered secrets spilled out like this week's hopscotch doodle. Each secret claimed ownership of your heart, while plastering a smile over your soot-streaked face. You'd absorbed the entirety of these overshared life stories while crawling through the blackened tubes, like a diseased spider weaving tales of tension, laughter, and unfulfilled aspirations. To maintain this facade of bravery, what you might now recognise as an elaborate mental gymnastic dance, you learned how to carve little moments of joy from the filth. Who could ever believe you could find camaraderie among other children slinking through tiny spaces? Those moments of laughter within the darkness were like rare gold, coins dropped from their pocket. A shared joke among fellow spies, a brief glance exchanged with a rival, and suddenly, for a split second, the soot faded. You weren't just a child prodigy of the flu, you were a hero in your own story. Imagine leaping out of a chimney in the nick of time, landing in the flower bed with nary a bruise, but the knowledge you'd survived yet another day's gulp in the world of adult woes. Of course, as you dusted off those wee bits of dirt while the roses bore witness to the victorious return, doubt began creeping in. What if those precious moments meant nothing? What if your laughter was nothing but an echo among the whispers of forgotten memories? And just like that, the blues would return. You mastered the ability to convulse with laughter one minute and slip into a morose reverie the next, stirring a potent cocktail of the blues within your young bones. After all, why merely exist in the present when you could burden yourself with the echoes of the past? Every taunting sound or echoed laugh cradled pain. Every joyful thought beckoned disbelief. A child of soot, and what was that worth? Forgotten, and yet held up in the highest esteem. Half of your peers barely knew who you were beneath the coal and sunburnt cracks. The other half would call for you only after a night's soiree, leaving you with a whispered prayer amidst shadows. Even then, that prayer came in the form of "Tomorrow I'll be the hero," as you curiously drifted back to yet another crowded chimney. Navigating through this convoluted reality moulded your identity, painting you as a misfit among a sea of chimney sweeps. And you? You became a nuanced figure tangled in childhood and adulthood. A chimney spy, a secret agent in the sooty world, grappling with not just the dank domains, but the fragments of dreams trapped in the flue like the ghosts of your aspirations. Even as you emerge from those flues covered in soot with a smile plastered over a chaotic mind, you cradled the hope that life had more to offer than the chimney's stifling embrace. Until then, you strapped on a brave grin and pressed forward. After all, the world outside was abuzz with life to explore. The world was an open flue just waiting to be discovered. Who knew that beyond the gloom might lie a clearer path? The adventure wasn't ending, it was just beginning. Behind the myriad soot-covered faces, you began to see a legacy. An unflattering fate, of course, as flues had exposed and even immortalised your kind. Perhaps you could lead a life beyond the soot, a metamorphosis into adulthood, having stuck your head into the looming void and survived. You stumbled upon an absolutely riveting thought: the future. It was almost enticing in its mystery, like a fresh bakery of hot bread followed by the lingering dread of what might lurk behind those oven doors. In your cramped little world, the cool breeze of adventure twisted oddly with a persistent smoky stench. You leaned against a grimy wall, pondering, what do I get to carry from this life? Harbinger of soot, or champion of the small? Was it all just gritty slogging to avoid the clutches of destiny? Or could you emerge as something remarkable? You became a part of the lore, heroes and heroines dipped in coal, spilling forth tales of daring rescues from unyielding chimneys and hairy escapades inside the soot-strewn alleys of Victorian London. This legacy wasn't just nostalgia, It grew with each story whispered on the corner street. Tales of tiny figures valiantly pushing past dampened expectations, scraping away layers of conflict and grime for the chance to uncover mysteries hidden behind brick walls. Your friends clenched their fists, coloured with soot like badges of honour, passionately recounting adventures climbing out of chimneys, hair whipping wildly as you panicked down each pipe, praying invisibility would be a gift from the gods, because being snared by an angry father was decidedly on the do not want list. It wasn't all heroics, though. You witnessed the grim reality sprawled about you, littered with the remnants of lives overshadowed by coal. You saw despair among young children, each clutching their own version of hope, be it the aspiration of dodging dust and despair, or just securing enough coin to buy food at the local market. The stories of your fellow chimney spies formed a tapestry, intricately woven into the pressures of the industrial age, illustrating the harsh grips of society squeezing not just the wealthy, but the very children expected to labour in their shadows. But you were more than an indentured worker. You were a mascot for resilience. With every soot-laden sweep you grew stronger, not just in body but in spirit. Your friends rallied around this transformation, sharing laughter that echoed from the depths of grime and fear. We may be little, but we're loud, they'd joke, grinning over stubborn blackest of faces. One day, chocolatey crumbs turned to stories shared of remarkable escapes when you eluded the whipped hand of a betrayal and carved your own path. A road showing your determination to break free from the constraints forged by coal dust and the class system. Suddenly, the world outside those chimney flues felt palpable, like a palpable change that was no longer just a whisper among the soot. You envisioned the possibility of shapeshifting into a hero, rather than a coal-ridden child, an angel or perhaps an ambassador of your kind. Every surreptitious glance at a passerby lay a challenge ignited within. Could you step outside of this world and forge ahead down the golden roads of opportunity? But then there were the shadows following, an oppressive gloom that marked every moment of triumph, those doubters who'd mutter, "Just a chimney sweep," while their noses twitched delicately in the face of your tenacious spirit. Yet that only stoked the flames of your determination. What did they know of your triumphs? You had stared into fire-laden depths and been reborn, becoming not merely a cog in society's wheels, but developing the grit to challenge the system that branded you. With each clandestine venture through the narrow, winding pathways of sweat and soot-built life, the possibility of change crackled in the air. You knew this legacy, this banner of grit and grime, was only the beginning. Through the symbols of ash, you learned the art of survival, resilience chiselled into every scrape and scratch until future generations would understand. The journey through soot bore fruit deeper than dirt. Perhaps children would grow up hearing stories, not of mere survival, but rather of gritty heroes striving, all ignited by their history as the angels of dirt. So, as you dusted off your coal-blackened hands and faced a bewildering future where adventure intertwined with freedom, you realised something profound. From ashes sprouts forth strength, a legacy that christened each child's path forward with the power of possibility. Your story would be heard, not just another forgotten tear in the dust, but a reminder that even in the darkest of flues, life flourishes, sustaining hope for generations to come. A legacy indeed, one worthy of cheers, curiosity, and perhaps even a touch of confetti thrown in celebration atop those chimney tops. After what seemed like endless days hidden away in clogged chimneys, you finally found freedom. Climbing out, you revelled in the bright light, the scent of fresh air slicing through your memories of coal. What was next? Adventure beckoned as you embraced the next phase of your hopefully better-groomed life. As you squinted against the blaze of the sun, a celebratory shimmer danced in your soul, making you feel as if you could take flight, even if the lingering odour of soot warned otherwise. Ah, but what of that first rush of freedom? You weren't just leaping from a chimney. You were escaping from the depths of grimy despair, a crawling creature relegated to the darkness of your youth. Your body felt electrified, each nerve buzzing a joyful tune that said, "I survived." Even the gusty breeze was a triumphant whistle of defiance against the dust-filled abyss you had just abandoned. Certainly the world outside your flue was more beautiful than you remembered, even if it still smelled vaguely of your labour. The fresh, embracing air filled with the tantalising scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, whose culinary endeavours were far superior to any meal you had nibbled on within the soot-laden confines. As you skipped down the cobblestone lanes, the realisation of your newfound freedom was intoxicating, but it came with a heavy twinge of reality. Who would care for you now, little chimney spy? Where would your next meal come from? Above all, who would acknowledge your adventures of sneaking around the heights and depths of London residences? Questions loomed like clouds overhead, darkening the gleam of freedom you just experienced. Just then, your gaze fell upon an alleyway where fellow chimney pets huddled. Some newly emerged from their murky oxygen deprivation as well. United in your rebellion against the grimy labour that defined your childhood, you felt drawn into their ranks, like some sort of wayward superhero squad, except you all happened to be scruffy and permanently dusty. Maybe you could lead a strike against chimneying. You imagined your splendiferous crusade, "We will climb the rooftops no more," and "No child shall be forced to scurry through soot." Yet as you spouted rallying cries to your comrades, it hit you. What was next? You were destined not just to climb back into the world of ordinary dust. You could indeed craft a new identity that belonged to a cleaner path. Your mind raced with possibilities. Could you beg, steal, set up the London equivalent of a lemonade stand but for poor children? Ah, the confusion. Just a moment before, you'd faced the dread of being stuck in a chimney, and now you were wrestling with the thrill of adult decisions. But your youthful perception, armed with plucky intelligence, began to formulate what you could achieve. You felt your self-worth rise, not unlike the smoke that once carried your young spirit up and out, mingling with the clouds, free from the limitations of labour. Just like your body grew tired of crawling through darkness, your soul had grown tired of hiding. You could ponder your deep fate while presenting the skills you had learned in the flues, how to charm a coin or two from startled passers-by, or secretly teach others about their own resilience through joyously ridiculous stories of chimney adventures. Who could resist a whimsical tale about the day you rescued a cat stuck in a soot-laden flue? But then came the lingering fear. What if that unsavoury side of chimney life snuck back into your glamorous dreams? Would the age-old cycle of tradition draw you back into the cold maw of the industry? As your heart raced, you couldn't help but consider the future, with all its uncertainties and possibilities. Still, the gleam of hope shimmered brighter as you forged ahead, your feet dancing down the streets, no longer prisoners but potential pioneers, born anew with a sense of purpose. So could you? After all, was it just another leap from the flue, or was it a trailblazing trek into a brighter Victorian tomorrow? As the sun dripped lower on the horizon, painting London's sky in hues of rose and gold, you caught a final breath of fresh air, savouring each delightful moment. You were born from the ashes of soot, stepping into the world with every intention of crafting your own grand adventure, turning whispered fantasies into delicious realities. Because out of coal dust, inspiration rises, and with a dash of courage, a clean sweep might just lead to unimaginable legacy. As you drifted back into the modern realm, you couldn't help but ponder the generational cycles that suck you back into dusty hard labour. Reflecting on society's perennial struggles, your heart pumped with the hopes of change, both as a child spy and as a true historian of soot-stained struggles. You might wonder, has anything really changed? Do little fingers still scrape chimneys? Or have we just found more insidious ways to keep kiddos busy, like harnessing their ceaseless energy for TikTok dances or video game marathons? The echoes of history reverberate through time, leaving us to grapple with whether our ambitious youth are destined for websites or workhouses. Ah, the whimsical world of Victorian-era chimney sweeping. It wasn't merely a profession, it frequently edited the script of young lives. The legacy of these little soot slaves was less about the theatrical, soot-induced grunge, and more about the raw reality of their existence, the chronic struggles that would continue to impact generations. Endless stories unfolded, from nightly escapes through coal-laden dilemmas to cross-continental labour migrations, as society searched for cheaper ways to maintain its ever-growing desire for convenience and cleanliness. You might picture it like a sitcom in which the world spun into chaos, with our young chimney spies navigating their treacherous path through smoke as they dodged the scrutiny of parents and Toronto vigilantes. However, stepping back into the 19th century required facing some grim truths. Long hours filled with treks up and down sooty tubes, all for the chance of little to no pay. It begs an opportunity to ask, what did these children aspire to? Were they just looking to escape their sooty reality, or did they dream of becoming the next chimney cleaning moguls? Navigating those heights came with more than consequences. It was a gamble for survival. While you scratched your way to the surface, those blackened pipes became your stairway to nowhere, a cycle that often led straight back to the soot. The truth was harsh. Many of those young chimney operatives faded into obscurity, limited by a cycle that crushed dreams beneath linens of ash. At home, whispers filled the fireplace, each heralding tales of former chimneys turned unearthed treasures that came at a cost. What good are diamond-studded dinners when there's nary an eye left to see them? Hop on the modern express train, my friend. The age of over-commercialised dreams has arrived, with eye-popping desires and dizzying wheeling and dealing. What's lost in translation, you wonder? Close your eyes and imagine children labouring tirelessly through chimneys, only to discover their predecessors of today's endless cycles of overly competitive sports, TikTok fame chasing, and the never-ending quest for that perfect Instagram shot. Ah, the hand-me-down ales of aspiration. Now, linger a moment, because that historical echo carries lessons, dusty reminders, urging us to learn from the stories shared before. If the chimney spies of yesteryears offered a grain of advice, perhaps it would be that labour will always rise anew, reborn with a new villain, be it social media, corporate job markets, or indeed the dreaded coal mines fittest for a heavy soul. As one group of children pulled up their socks to shimmy into the chimney, while the next clambered for the latest gadget, the circle of struggles persisted. Reflecting on this, you marvel at the irony. Victorian spine-cracking labours gave way to today's office jockeys and sideline hustlers. Generational cycles clung like soot to porcelain plates, apt reminders that resilience often goes hand in hand with work, whereas the price of modern convenience borrowed from the lessons of the past, a kind of social amnesia we love to forget. Still, through the haze of history, hope emerged amid darkness. Perhaps, just perhaps, every horror story of the Chimney Spies reminds us to treasure progress. Adults, for better or worse, carry the balloon of responsibility to raise children in the light of dreams, a chance that firmly ousts oppressive labour from the equation of their futures. So breathe deep, my soot-filled compatriot, and vow to shield those youthful aspirations from the cycles that threaten to embrace darkness. As you wake from this daydream of soot-encrusted childhoods, allow the past to paint your vision for tomorrow. The journey isn't easy, but with legs freed from the oppressive flues of yesteryear, you might find that balance between laughter and hardship exists, waiting for its story to emerge like a phoenix rising from the ashes,